Greetings, my people. It's Mr. PDT and Mr. P yet again on another episode of the Enlightenment series. This chapter will shake the table. I've spoken about this episode in my previous episodes, and I think the time has arrived for us to address this issue, for it is very critical and it's very important to the Church of God. The problem that we have in Christianity, we do not have a standard upon which we measure the actions and the ways of conduct of our spiritual leaders or of these pastors and these prophets. They seem to be getting away with everything. They seem to be getting away with anything. And most of you end up following them because of blind faith. You do not count their immoralities. You do not count the number and the times that they break the law. And how does it make sense for you to be led by someone who is in sin? How does it make spiritual sense for you to be taking advice from someone who has broken all the laws or the commandments or the principles of the Bible? My brother, Mr. Brilliant Pongo, is going to walk us through if we should pay attention or listen to men that have fallen and are still living in sin. And the topic of the conversation will be centered around divorce. Most of you have seen the highest divorce rates in these ministries or in these churches. But there's a reason why we have high divorce rates in these churches. And some of those reasons are what we're going to hear or discuss with Mr. Brilliant Pongo. My brother, how do you look at this? What do you think about divorce?
Let me put it this way. You know, when you think about a church,
Yeah.
it should be something that is close to a family unit. Mm-hmm. It is an extension of the family unit and should be the exemplar of a family unit. Mm-hmm. So in there should be people that when there's a crisis, they are there. When there is a disagreement, they are there to bring about the levels of peace that are required in a union, be it a marriage. Mm-hmm. Now we have churches that have leaders that are not qualified to be counselors of marriage. But by saying qualified, I'm not saying they need to go to some school to do this. Can you imagine if you had a wife and you are a Catholic? I'm going to touch on the Catholics here. Mm-hmm. And then you had to go to some father in the Catholic Church
Who has never been
married, but is called father. And you are going to try and seek marriage counsel. This guy has never lived with a wife or a woman in his life. He's vowed a vow of celibacy, and you know it doesn't work in that way. So maybe they have structures in there of other people that are leaders within the church. They might not be the father, the priest, but they are the leaders within that particular branch or particular church that then sit you down and counsel with you. That's there in the Catholic Church. It might not be done by the priest, but it's there. In other churches, the Methodist Church, all this, they're elders. And when they speak of elders, they're not talking about 23-year-olds or 22-year-olds. They're talking about mature people that have gone through life.
Okay, my brother,
I'm trying to get to this.
Okay.
So when you look at it, when you look at all that, it's there in the traditional churches. But my challenge now is to face these charlatan run churches where there is a higher divorce rate because most of the things I said, the Spirit said this, the Spirit said that, the Spirit said this, and it's coming from Papa. And in some cases, the very papas are the ones that are causing the divorces because they see a pastor's wife, they envy that pastor's wife, they end up bedding that pastor's wife and telling their pastor that your woman is not, God is saying that this woman is not good for you. But they have taken advantage, they've broken, so they are responsible. Many of them are responsible for breaking up unions, breaking up marriages, and they have caused divorce
in the families of their followers.
So when you are led by those people that are they themselves, because when you introduced this, you said people that have sinned. These are not. This is not past. This is current. They are sinning as they are leading
continuously.
Yes, Moses sinned, repented, and led.
And never sinned again.
These ones are sinning in the process of leadership.
Okay,
So
case in point, with pastors like Oyakilome, Chris, he recently divorced. And the majority did not pay attention to this. They still believe, he's a man of God, and he still gives marriage counseling. to some of the married couples in his church. We have people like Joshua Iginla. He left his wife. He recently married another Stella from here in South Africa, a yellowbone. And he's still continuing fooling gullibles. We have Chris Okafor of Nigeria. He divorced his wife as well. Now he is sleeping with slay queens around Nigeria, and he even imports some of them from countries like Namibia and South Africa. And now we can't talk about Omoto Fofeng. He's divorced, but he's still using his wife as a front to make people believe that he is real in marriage. But Omoto has so many girlfriends that he invites. Okay, me and my brother, I'm not afraid of legal or whatever that can come with my allegations and accusations. They call me Mr. PDT for a reason. Right. I say it as it is. All these men that I've mentioned are so much promiscuous. They have no limit. They have no zip on their trousers. If we could dress a tree, or if we could put a miniskirt around a tree, you see these men backing on that tree. They can't stand anything in a skirt. They can't stand anything in a skirt. So let's have a background of this discussion.
All right.
What does the Bible say about divorce?
I think it's important because a lot of people, right, sometimes, like I like discussing, but there's times then when we have to throw scripture in. This is very important that we put scripture into context and put scripture out there. So it's something that I put together earlier so that we could just make this statement, right? So the Bible presents different perspectives. It presents different perspectives on divorce. Okay. And in different parts of the Old Testament and the New Testament, we find these statements that are made in Scripture, right? Some of the Old Testament laws, Jesus Christ even quoted when he was asked about divorce. So, for example, in the Old Testament, divorce was allowed under certain circumstances. So in Deuteronomy, for example, we read this in Deuteronomy 24 from verse 1 to 4. Those of you with scripture, you could always read this later. It says that if a man marries a woman, then finds some uncleanness in her, he may give her a certificate of divorce and send her away. However, this was considered a concession to human weakness. So we all know that as humans we're weak, yes. And divorce was not something that God intended. So it's clear that God never intended for divorce, but because we are man, we are human, we fall short. And when we fall short, we have to do things the right way. So for example, in a case where there was adultery, in a case where a man has caught his wife in adultery, he is allowed to divorce her. So maybe the question that people may ask is, we have big men, big charlatans, big leaders in church, like Chris Oakalomi. He divorced
Anita.
He divorced Anita. Was it Anita? Did he catch Anita in adultery, or did he commit adultery and Anita found out? Those things we may never know, but we know that he divorced, and the reasons for the divorce, if he divorced based on scripture, that means Anita was caught in adultery. If it's based on this particular type scripture.
So that way it can be justified.
It can be justified. Otherwise, it's not.
So that's the question, my people. When Chris divorced Anita, either one of them was guilty of infidelity. Either one of them was caught being adulterous. So the question now is, was it Chris himself who was adulterous, or was it Anita who was adulterous? It can only be that scenario for divorce to be permitted or justified according to the Bible.
In the New Testament, Jesus spoke about divorce in Matthew 19 from verse 3 to 9. And in Mark, he also speaks about that in chapter 10, verse 2 to 12. Read this at your own pace in your own time. When asked about divorce, Jesus quoted from Genesis 1, verse 27, and he also quoted from Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, which says that God created male and female to be one flesh in marriage, and that what God has joined together, let no one separate, or in words that are more familiar with people, let no man put asunder. Jesus then said that Moses allowed divorce because of the hardness of the human hearts, which is the human weakness that we spoke about earlier. But that was not God's original intention. So again, we learn that God's intention was never for divorce. But because of our frailties and our weaknesses, Moses as a leader permitted that.
That's in the Old Testament.
That's in the Old Testament. He added that whosoever divorced his wife, this is Jesus again quoting from that. He added that whosoever divorces his wife and then marries another commits adultery, unless the divorce was due to marital unfaithfulness. Read your scriptures. Find Matthew 19, verse 9. You'll find that that's where I'm paraphrasing this from. I'm summarizing this so we can go through this. Paul, in the 1 Corinthians 7, from verse 10 to 16, provides guidance to Christians who are already married. So this is perhaps guidance that in Ginla, Chris, or Kofu, or all the other people that you mentioned needed to look at before they made the step that they did. If it was not because they'd caught their women or their wives in adultery. He encourages those that are already married. He encourages spouses to remain married if possible. But if one spouse is not a believer and chooses to leave, the believer is not bound to the marriage. Paul also says that if an unbelieving spouse is willing to stay in the marriage, the believer should not divorce them. So you can have a wife that does not go to church. If she does not want you to divorce her,
You mustn't.
you mustn't. So this is the thing. So overall, the Bible recognizes divorce as a reality in human relationships. The Bible recognizes that, but emphasizes that it is not of God. It is not God's ideal. So Christians are encouraged to seek reconciliation and forgiveness in their marriages and to honor the sanctity of marriage as a sacred covenant before God. So this is a very sacred covenant before God, marriage. And if as a leader, you are unable to sustain a marriage, questions need to be asked.
So, do you have the capacity or the sanity to lead children of God who are in relationships or couples if you have defiled this holy, sacred institution of marriage? Case in point with Oyakilome. Let's talk about the big dogs. All these smaller nyanas would address them later. But if we kill the head of the snake, if we smash the head of the snake, the rest of the body becomes a rope. So if we deal with the bigger charlatan, Oyakilome, it becomes easier for these little ones to learn as well.
Sitting here, I'm just thinking about this. I'm just thinking about this very case. I don't know how much coverage was given to Chris Oyakilome's divorce with Anita. I tried to look up. If you try and search for Anita on Google or anything, there's very little that you're going to find.
Really?
Very, very little that you're going to find on her. And I was wondering whether they really tried to wipe everything out that had anything to do with Anita and a connection to
not even their pictures together.
There's
or
not
anything.
a single picture of them together that you would find. They have been removed. So, is Chris that upset with Anita because he caught Anita in adultery? Or is it Anita that caught Chris in adultery? What were the circumstances beyond this divorce? So anything to do with their marriage is not really there for anyone to see. So we don't know. And a lot of those that are his followers would say, but that's not your business. It is.
No, it is our business.
Because
What
of
do
his position. Because he's positioning himself as a leader. And it should be questioned. So it cannot, even leaders would say, okay, leaders should have privacy. Yes, there are lines that we say, okay, this is, if he was with Anita now, and they were to go into a separate space and they wanted to have their time, we could not intrude into their privacy. But once something like this happens, that there's now a divorce, it is now
something
game.
that must
It is
be
free game
speculated.
yes, it's free game for any journalist. It is free game for anyone that is a believer to say, but if the leader is failing this, how is he going to cancel me on the same things?
I also heard, if you know Strive, one of the billionaire of Zimbabwe, Strive Masiwa, he was a big-time member of Chris Oyakilome's ministry. But after this divorce, I hear that he started moving away to say, I cannot have you as someone who can lead me if you can't keep your house in order. If you can't save your own marriage, then what qualifies you to lead me as someone who's married? What are you going to teach me about the scripture? If you have failed to manage a family, how can you manage an entire congregation?
I don't really follow much of his teachings at the moment, and I probably have not come across any teaching that he's teaching about marriage, the sanctity of marriage, or anything like that. Is that something that he now avoids because he feels less qualified to do, or is it something that he does not do because I mean, I questioned the last time that, as a man, I would want to understand, okay, did he remarry? Does he have somebody that he's with now? Does he have a fiance? Does he have
Someone
somebody?
that is official, or yes,
Yeah.
unofficial ones.
We see, that's the thing. And then we have all these other charlatans, the ones that you refer to as the smolanyana ones.
The baby charlatans.
Yes, those ones are literally just bedding their pastors' wives.
Yeah.
So they are giving reason for divorce. So they are fueling divorce. And so we need to question these things and see who it is that is leading us. Because some of these guys become so... you can't access them because of how they've positioned themselves in their churches. They become demigods. So for you to go and speak to prophet, to speak to the leader there, you have to pay a certain amount. So if you are having a crisis and you're going through a rough patch in your marriage, which might end up in divorce, and you need someone to counsel you spiritually to do that, and you are asked to pay a fee to go and see a prophet. These guys, in my view, when you're a shepherd, a shepherd has to smell like his sheep because he's with the sheep. In this case, these guys that are calling themselves shepherds, shepherding this flock, the congregates, they have separated themselves so far, they've removed themselves from the congregation that they are so detached from the reality on the ground. They live in their own little bubbles. This is why you find that they live in such opulence. They have so much riches and wealth around them in their palaces that they are now building for themselves. And yet their congregates are living in squalor. So how is this shepherd a good shepherd if he does not smell like his sheep? It's just food for thought.
My people, let us know what you think in the comment section. If these divorcees, if these leaders, these prophets and pastors who left their wives on a different merit altogether, which has nothing to do with infidelity, should they be leading their members, married couples? Are they holy enough to teach you about the scripture if they are violating the scripture themselves? You let us know what you think in the comment section. Until we meet you again on the next episode of the Enlightenment series, it's Mr. PDT and Mr. Brilliant. We're out.